me. So a couple months ago, Scott and Shannon Davey said, there's this guy named Sonny Vardeman, and you really need to interview him. And I said, oh, I've met him once. He's adorable. I will absolutely do that.
There you go.
So here we are. Thank you everybody for coming to our cafe story session. We're so excited and privileged to be here. First and foremost, I really want to thank Fred, the owner of Gitana's. He is such a tremendous supporter of the community, the programs here, all of the different individuals that live here, and we're so blessed to be able to get out and see a little bit of the sun, a little bit of the breeze, and kind of do something off-site in the community. And I can think of nobody I would rather be here with today other than you.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Now I'm not really a public speaker, so I'm going to hand this over to you and we'll get started. It's kind of almost like you're checking into jail. We're going to ask you some initial questions like your name, tell me a little bit about you.
I can tell you all that.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay.
My name is Sonny Vardeman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I've been in the city for a lot of years, since 1938. I was actually born in Fresno, California, but one of my first family homes were right up the hill here on Silver Strand. And
that's our street.
well, it's a nice street. Anyway, I attended North School, which is now, Vista? And there at North School, I met a lot of lifelong friends. Some of them you may know, Chip Post and John Ryan and Mike Bright and Rick Stoner and Jim Lindsay. And those were kind of my pals. And one guy was, my best friend was Rick Stoner, and he lived right down in the valley over on 25th Street. And his grandparents had a nice big lot joined by his parents. So it was a huge lot, and they had a barn there with a horse. The horse's name was Bill, and after school, Rick's grandmother would make great cookies, and Rick and I would go down there and get some cookies and play with the horse. Well, one day after school, we went down there, and Rick's mother was all excited. Bill got out of the corral, and he was cruising the neighborhood, and the worry was he would go up the hill and try to cross the coast highway and could possibly hit by a car. So Rick and I would scurry around and find Bill, jump on his back, and ride him back to the corral. And that was one of the exciting memories there. But I have a few other memories I could share with you. I remember the railroad, the freight trains coming down the Greenbelt, delivering freight and raw silk to the silk spinning factory on Pier Avenue, and the lumber to the lumber yard on 6th Street, which is the start of Lerner Lumber. And then, of course, there was the Vetter windmill with the water tank that irrigated the beautiful gardens that were in the valley. They were commercial gardens, and the whole valley would be one big, beautiful garden. And the gardeners would wholesale them. They'd put them on trucks and drive them to LA to the flower market very early in the morning. And then there's downtown, the base of the pier, and that beautiful archways. Why they didn't replace that, I don't know. But it was the library was there on the left side, and the Chamber of Commerce on the right side. Behind the Chamber of Commerce was the Hermosa Beach Surfing Club, and in front of that was the Los Angeles County Lifeguard headquarters. Just to the left of that was the Hermosa Aquarium, and they had aquatic shows there where the trainers would feed the seals, and it was quite an attraction. And then, of course, there was the Biltmore Hotel. They had an indoor swimming pool, and that's where I learned to swim. J.C. Penney's, the men's store, I believe there was a Safeway market there, and the Metropolitan Theater, which was, we would go there on weekends to watch the movies. And it was wartime, and they would always show the newsreel of the progress in Germany and the Pacific Wars. And that's when we had air raid wardens. It would be the sirens would sound, and everybody had to black out their houses. This was shortly after Pearl Harbor. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and that always used to scare me. My mother would just totally freak out and hide in the closet, and I couldn't stand it. I don't know. I was more afraid of my mother than the Japanese. And I would talk my father. My father was in the National Guard, and he was an air raid warden. And he would go out with his flashlight and make sure everybody was darkened. And I would get to go with him. And I remember one night, it was very quiet, dark, no cars, no lights, and the searchlights were going back and forth looking for enemy aircraft. Everybody was on edge because this was right after Pearl Harbor. And one night, there was a reported unidentified airplane coming in off the west end of Catalina Island. And the gun bunkers on Palos Verdes opened up. And I remember hearing the distant booms from our top of Silver Strand. And so those were scary times. They were just everybody was on edge. And about that time, a Japanese submarine surfaced south of Santa Barbara and actually bombed some of the oil wells up there. And so anyway, the war ended, and it was good times. Everything was back to normal, and everybody was having a good times again. And that's when I started going to the beach a lot with my friends, and we learned to body surf. We learned to belly board. We'd make our belly boards out of an old piece of plywood or something. And then it was on to canvas surf mats that we'd go down by the pier and rent them and ride the waves in on the surf mats. And it was there at the pier that we would watch the surfers from the Hermosa Surf Club and the lifeguards surf with their, some of them were redwood boards, some of them were hollow plywood boards. And they were the real pioneers of California surfing that were there. The Kerwin brothers, Doc Ball, Hoppy Schwartz, Leroy Granis, Jim Bailey, and another young hotshot named Dale Velzy, who was shaping boards on the beach down there. Anyway, we would watch the surfers there, and as the boards bounded in to shore, we would grab them and go out to about waist deep water, turn them around, and ride them in. And that's where I first learned to stand up on a surfboard. Well, eventually I got a board that was made of plywood. They were called kook boxes. And they leaked. And the water would get inside, and it would tip the board from one side to the other. And they had a drain hole in the nose. We'd drag them up the beach, tip them up, and drain them. And so that was my first surfboard. And then Belzy had moved to Manhattan Beach, and he started making balsa wood boards. That was the new type of board to have. So eventually my buddies and I would ride up there, watch him shape boards, and we all got Belzy surfboards. And our group, we went to the beach at 17th Street in Hermosa in front of Mike Bright's house. We were about 15 to 18 at that time, so we started a surf club called the Hermosa Surfing Seals. And we continued to surf there, and we'd go down to 22nd Street and surf with some of the older guys there, Bob Bergstrom, Stu Linder, and Anderson, and Donnie Peterman, John McFarland, some of those guys. And before we were driving, we would hop rides with these guys to the Cove, or on a special occasion, even up to Malibu. So that was a real treat, too. And then during high school, we would continue to hang out at Belzy's shop, watching him shape. And that's where we met two of our counterparts from Manhattan Beach, was Greg Knoll and Bing Copeland. And we were actually learning how to shape boards watching Belzy. And Belzy was a very charismatic man. He was a ex-merchant marineman, and he surfed a lot of islands in the Pacific, including New Zealand and Australia. And his favorite place was Hawaii, the big, beautiful waves of Hawaii. And so one day, we were seniors in high school, and John McFarland, one of the lifeguards, said, "You know, if you guys want to go to Hawaii and surf this coming winter, you ought to take the upcoming lifeguard test." So 5 of us took the test. We passed when we were seniors in high school at Maricosta, and worked that summer. And at the end of the summer, it was October. We had we bought, well, by the way, the draft board was on our case right after high school. And we were about ready to get drafted. So we bought one-way tickets to Hawaii. And it was Pacific Airlines or they called it Rubber Band Airlines. And we flew out of Burbank. And it was a 12-hour flight. We had to stop in San Francisco to get gas. Landed in Honolulu and spent a week in Waikiki surfing. And then we bought an old car, made some makeshift surfboard racks on the top, strapped on our boards, and we drove to the country at Makaha Beach where the big waves were. We spent 3 months surfing at Point at Makaha. We rented a Quonset hut, and those are the military housing buildings, and we surfed there in Makaha, and we'd occasionally drive over to the North Shore, which was a no man's land in 1955, and we surfed. The only surfing spots then was Haleiwa and Sunset Beach, and we would be the only guys surfing there. We would be the only people. And actually, we're the locals at Makaha, too. And so with that, and then the draft board was breathing down our necks. So my friend Steve Voorhees and I, oh, by the way, making that first initial trip was Bing Copeland, Mike Bright, Rick Stoner, Steve Voorhees, and myself. Excuse me. So the draft board was breathing down our necks, and so Steve and I went down and joined the Navy at Pearl Harbor to get a free ride home. And Rick and Bing joined the Coast Guard over there, and Mike Bright flew home and got married and started having babies, avoided the draft. So after
One way to do it.
2 years in the Navy, and everybody served their time, which were about 2 years in those days. We came home, and Greg Knoll by that time was making surfboards in Manhattan Beach, and Belzy had partnered up with Hap Jacobs and moved to Venice at the time, and Greg Knoll had his shop in Manhattan, and he was starting to make surf films, which we would show at Fair Avenue School. Some of those, you might remember those. And Greg was going to go do a surf trip to Mexico and do a film, and Rick Stoner and I joined him. Rick and I bought a teardrop trailer and hooked it up to my 47 Ford, and Greg Knoll had a Studebaker, and off we went to mainland Mexico for 3 months, filming a film which Greg called Search for Surf. So we found a lot of neat surfing spots on the coast of Mexico. Then we returned home, and we started to make surfboards. And Rick and Bing teed up together and opened a shop on the Strand in Hermosa. Hap Jacobs split with Velzy. And Hap opened a shop on the Coast Highway in Hermosa. And so the surf craze in the 1960s, it was the boom years. The surf films were going on. Greg Knoll was showing films in high school auditoriums, and Bruce Brown down south made films, and uh, John Severson made films, and it became very popular. And I call it the '60s, the boom to bust years. The surf music came on with the Beach Boys and Dick Dale. The magazines started up with Surfer magazines and several others. And then Hollywood came out with Gidget, and it was on fire. We had more surfboards and we to make than we can handle, all of us. By the way, all the guys making surfboards were surfers. We were friends. We surfed together, so it was a friendly competition, somewhat. And let's see, and all the boards were handmade. And right here in the South Bay in the '60s, there was probably handmade surfboards, probably 400 to 500 boards a week being made. And then the East Coast lit up after some of the movies, and it became a big market to wholesale to the East Coast. Well, those were the boom years, the '60s. In my case, I moved to Huntington Beach and I started a surfboard company on the Coast Highway called Vardeman Surfboards, and I was there for most of the '60s, keeping my status as a lifeguard in the meantime, and inactive. And so in 1969 or '70, there was what they called the shortboard revolution. There was a young Australian guy that came over and he won the world championships in San Diego. His name was Nat Young, and he had a modern shortboard made by Bob McTavish. And from that point on, everybody wanted a shortboard. Well, the major manufacturers were all stuck with a big volume of longboards, and the East Coast was loaded with longboards, and they could not sell. So that's the bust years that began. The major manufacturers were overextended. A lot of them went out of business, sold their names, or went bankrupt. In my case, I sold my Huntington shop. I opened a small shop on 2nd Street and Hermosa Avenue for a couple of years, and I took a full-time position with the lifeguards. And that was in 1969 that I became a full-time lifeguard. And I had a very full career. I worked all the South Bay beaches. I spent a couple of years running the Baywatch Redondo, Baywatch Santa Monica, and Baywatch at Cabrillo Beach in LA Harbor. Had a lot of special assignments. Went to Australia on exchange groups, about 3 different trips. And one of my unusual assignments was technical advisor of a movie called Baywatch, a television show. That was a real experience dealing with Hollywood. But I made David Hasselhoff get a haircut, by the way, and told him how to hold a surfboard. But he wouldn't take his tennis shoes off. He was he was a tall guy, basketball player, and he didn't like to walk in the sand barefoot. So at the first couple of series, you knew it never showed his feet. Anyway, I did that for one summer, and I've had it, and I got out of that deal. And then let's see. Anyway, a lot of experience with lifeguards, some major rescue experiences. I will tell you one that was very publicized. It was an air crash in the surf line right in front of me. I was I was the captain in charge of Redondo Torrance area at the time, and it was about 1980. Came to work one morning very early. It was in January, so we had no staff. There was a man at Torrance and one up by the pier. Then I was at Avenue C, and the fog was so heavy I could not see the ocean from the station. So I decided that I better take a jog along the beach and just to see what's going on. So as I was jogging along, could hardly see past the surf line. I heard this airplane, a small aircraft approach, and came in very loud from the north. The tail hit, went over, and the propellers caught it and turned it upside down in the surf line, right in front of me. I had enough sense to run back and get the emergency truck and call for a backup. Then I hit the surf and swam out, and the passenger popped up. He seemed to be okay. I gave him my rescue can and told him, you don't let go of this. And he says, well, the pilot's upside down in the seat. So I was standing on the wing, hanging on to the strut, and I could not get him out of his seat. So two or three young men came running from shore to help me, and I got his head above water, the pilot. And through training, my initial response was start mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Well, the waves were breaking over us. So I held my hand over his mouth. In between waves, I would breathe in his mouth. And by that time, quite a crowd showed up, and they started pulling the aircraft ashore. It was a small single-engine Cessna, I believe. And they dragged it up the beach, and I surfed in on the wing, or hanging on, and started CPR on the beach, and tipped him from side to side to drain him. And then our emergency unit showed up from Hermosa, and they got the resuscitators and aspirators and defibrillation on him, and he started breathing on his own. And the FAA was all over it. Excuse me, let me get some water.
While you have a sip of water, this was one of two instances that awarded you the Medal of Valor as a lifeguard.
I'll get into that, Jamie.
Actually.
She's off script. See. So the FAA, of course, shows up, Federal Aviation Administration. They're all over it. They questioned me. They examined the plane. And they wanted all the reports. And so I gave them the best I could remember. Of course, we had the lifeguard. We had internal reports we had to do for major incidents. So I had it pretty well written up. And about a month later, the FAA regional office called the County Board of Supervisors, and they said that we want to award your lifeguard a Distinguished Service Medal. And so the Board of Supervisors called our department head, and well, they were all excited, and they didn't know what to do, and because it was it was all over the media, and so they had a ceremony down at our 2600 block in Manhattan at the community center there, the lifeguard center. And I was there, and three young men had helped me get the people out of the plane. They showed up, and the media was there. County Board of Supervisors, two of them were there. And the man that I gave mouth to mouth to was there with his whole family. And that was pretty traumatic. And so anyway, from that point, the lifeguard division said, geez, we better, geez, Sonny gets a medal from the FAA, we better do something and give him. So they decided to come up with a Medal of Valor, Lifeguard Medal of Valor. And at the summer dinner where the beginning of the surf festival, they decided to present me with the first ever Lifeguard Medal of Valor. And that was that was just one experience. I think the most chaotic experience that I had, and Shannon and Scott may have been involved in it, with some of the big winter storms of 1983 and 1988. You probably remember some of that, Dorothy. And it was a perfect storm. The surf was 15 to 20 feet. The wind was 30 miles an hour, and it was a 7-foot tide. It just ripped into the piers, and King Harbor took a major blow, lost a lot of restaurants and a big section of the Portofino Hotel. And I was called out that night, and we had the Bay Watch in the harbor pulling boats off the moorings back to safe positions. And that was a very heroic experience, with waves breaking over the break wall and taking our Bay Watch and spinning it like a cork. And I was in a lifeguard vehicle along with another lifeguard, and we were called out down there because the commercial fishing boat, the City of Redondo, is moored next to the fishing pier, rolled over on its mooring. It was upside down. And some life jackets floated out, and they had strobe lights on them that were flashing. Well, people reported that people were in the water. And so we were there, and I started questioning some people, and it was nothing but churning foam, but the boat was upside down. Nobody is in those life jackets. So we stayed on shore. We didn't jump in. But that night was so chaotic. The waves were crashing over the wall by the Portofino, and guests were stranded out there. 2 police cars, no, not one, just one police car, was knocked into the basin with 2 policemen in it. They scrambled out and got to safety. And then there was another vehicle there from the press that got knocked into the harbor. And there was a news chopper that was landing next to the Portofino Hotel, evacuating people over to the Hermosa Avenue or Harbor Drive. And the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour. I mean, it was absolute chaos down there. So that was one real bad night. Then I think the storm previous to that, I think it was 83. I don't know if, Scott, you remember when they knocked down the garage doors at headquarters by the waves?
Vehicles floating?
Yeah. Anyway, lifeguards got caught off guard in the 83 storm. The waves crashed, coming in again, high tide, crashed into our lifeguard headquarters at the Hermosa Pier, knocked down the garage doors and flooded several vehicles. Oh, good job, boys, you know. So, and then you mentioned the second Medal of Valor. After I retired in 1993 after 38 years of service. And I lived on the beach at the south of the pier there, and I'd continue to walk, run the shoreline and take a swim and body surf. And one spring day, the rips were really bad. There were no lifeguards on duty yet at the south end of the beach. And there was an Oriental family of about 3 kids and his father walking out on a sandbar. and I saw the potential, and I tried to wave them ashore, and they were not paying attention, and the drift put them right into the inshore holes, and out they went. They were drowning right in front of me. I ran out on the sandbar and managed to get the father. I told him to go to shore, let me handle this. And I got one other child, an older child, onto the sandbar and told him to walk to shore. The other two kids grabbed onto me, and down we went. We sunk. I couldn't hold them up. And I would bounce off the bottom, come up, get our breaths, and go down again, take on water, go up. And I finally hit the sandbar and got him ashore. And that was the second medal. Excuse me a second.
I don't really know what to say. Like in the moment of pause, so Sonny can have a sip of water. Aside from I read an article from the '80s that you were quoted in, and I think at the time you might have been.
Article from who?
It was an article in a newspaper that I pulled up, and
Not the Easy Reader.
it was not the Easy Reader because the Easy Reader hasn't been digitized yet, but coming soon to a city near you.
What?
And you, I think, were working potentially a night shift at the main station at the pier, and I think it was a time when they were trying to justify having 24-hour service lifeguards at that station at the pier. And you said, well, people depend on us. You know, what happens when after 40 years, the spot has been open for 24 hours a day? What happens when somebody comes here and needs help and there's nobody here? And this was a time we take for granted. You know, emergency services is a relatively new thing. If somebody's spouse had a heart attack, they would potentially go to a lifeguard station for help. And I think
I said that?
You did, actually. You said people would show up and ask you for help because they knew you guys were always there.
Well,
that is one of
maybe
the amazing things about lifeguards.
Trying to save our 24 hours. I don't know.
That's true. But this, I think the sentiment remains is that people count on you guys, and it's because you guys have always been there.
I guess.
Even
that right, Scott?
after retirement.
I got a couple of my colleagues in the office, Captain or Chief Scott Davey and his wife, Captain Shannon Davey over there. Shannon and Scott Davey, my colleagues. They, I'll tell a little side story about that one. I was the captain in charge of Redondo and Torrance, and Scott was one of the veteran lifeguards. He kept coming down there. Then we got Shannon, who was a young rookie, and they were working side by side in the towers down there. Well, they got together and started dating, got married, and continued their careers as lifeguards. Huh? Anyway. Oh, yeah. It did cost them both a few points on their evaluation. But anyway, I guess that's my story. If you're all tired of it by now, and any John Lindinger over there, he's surfboard sales, super salesman. He relates to some of these surf stories, and yes, I remember Gene Sedello's surf shop there.
He's the guy that made boards on the cover of the Beach Boy album where they created the surfboard with stripes on it. Gene Sedello is what it made that. Wow. Jamie, that's a good piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
Featured that board.
Yeah, we have a replica.
Yeah.
Anyway, most of you beach people are beach people here today, so you're familiar with the lifeguards, and I'm sure you've had friends that tell some familiar stories like that. But Tom Horton, Tom's still here, South Bay Board Riders president right back there. Great organization, do a lot for the community, fundraisers, etc. Kevin, Cody, do you have any questions for the paper?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, if anybody has any questions for Sonny, we're gonna hold on to him for a little longer.
No, I think they're tired. What? Pass the word. I can't hear him.
We can't hear you.
Pass the word, Shannon.
Shannon threatened to rescue him one day. He got caught in a riptide and wasn't making progress.
Huh?
So that gave you the energy to swim back in. Or Shannon would have to rescue him.
What is
Kevin
he
said
making
that
fun of me?
Shannon-
What?
Of Shannon.
Oh, Shannon.
Shannon was giving Kevin a bad time for a good reason, though. She was watching him.
Hi, are you Frank? Yeah, it's Frank. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Like
Okay,
to recognize Frank, the owner here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.
What a wonderful story.
Wait, hold on. I
Wow.
have a question for you that I always
Okay.
like to ask anybody that's a veteran of a city or county department. What's one of your favorite changes that you've seen happen for the LA County lifeguards?
Pay raises.
Enough said.
Good answer. Sure.
Pensions. Actually, I came on when the lifeguards were essentially Redondo, Hermosa, and Manhattan. And I think our staff was about 15 to 20 guys. And so I saw the department grow and expand. Started the junior lifeguard program, acquiring other beaches. We took over Santa Monica, LA City, Catalina Island. We have today 2 24-hour paramedic rescue boats on Catalina Island, one in Avalon and one in the Isthmus. We have a 24-hour rescue boat in LA Harbor and a 24-hour rescue boat in Marina del Rey. And I believe Redondo now too. Yeah, I want that. So I've seen a lot of expansion, and we have the entire county now from San Pedro to the Ventura County line, including Catalina Island. So I watched a lot of that grow and participated in some of it. One year, I think it was 1975, when we took over Santa Monica, they sent 3 of us to Santa Monica Lifeguard Service to be the indoctrination team to show the Santa Monica lifeguards how the County of Los Angeles runs things. And myself and Captain John McFarland and another fellow from Zuma were stationed there for that summer. And that was quite an experience in itself, transforming or training, not training, but just observing how they do things and indoctrinating them how we do things. So that was another growing experience. And then just watching the whole department grow, and the junior lifeguards, I mean, it's amazing. We started with a handful of kids down in Hermosa Pier, and now there's something in the neighborhood of 4,000 junior guards from Catalina, Cabrillo, all the way to 4,000. Can you imagine? Needless to say, it's a recruiting tool. And you read in the paper, particularly the East Coast, where they have times when there's shortages of lifeguards. We do not have shortages of lifeguards. It's very competitive to get on. And every spring, they will have an exam. Is it in the springtime now, or I don't know. Anyway, I've been retired longer than I work, so you have to. So anyway, I guess that's it. Any more questions?
Do we have any questions for Sonny?
Nah, I think that's anyway.
You're good?
Tom Martin, give me a question.
Are you still in the water?
Ooh.
Pardon?
Are you still a waterman? You still in the water?
Still go out in the water.
Yes. Oh, yes. I live right off the beach, and I don't go in when it's rough or cold anymore. I might need a lifeguard then. I don't know if I could depend on them. But I do body surf, and I stopped surfboarding at age 76, and today I only surf in my dreams. So it stays with you.
What was your most memorable surf experience?
What was your most memorable surf experience?
I think going to Hawaii for the first time and surfing some of those,
Mhm.
like our trips to the North Shore at Sunset Beach, pulling up there and the five of us, nobody out, and watching the surf and the currents there, and it was intimidating. And then,
Mhm.
of course, surfing the big waves at Makaha, some were calling up to 20 feet. Uh, that's quite an experience. Uh, 20 feet, well, not quite as one of these 30-foot buildings, Scott. So anyway, they're big waves, and it's a lot of heavy water movement. And
What had you start your shop down in Huntington versus Hermosa?
Why did you start your shop there?
That's a long story. It was very competitive here, as you can imagine, and as some of the surf shops lined up on the Coast Highway, they're going to call the Miracle Mile. Very competitive, but there was plenty of business for everybody. And at the time I was married, and the wife was, and the in-laws had a business in Disneyland. So that was one of the main purposes of going to Huntington. And Huntington, I hate to say it, Hermosa, but Huntington has better surf. It is Surf City, by the way.
No.
Officially, it is.
Ah!
Copyrighted it.
Yeah.
Somebody's built the camera.
What?
You can surf Hermosa, you can surf anywhere.
When I started working at the museum, I went into the office and the only sticker up on the wall said Hermosa Beach, the true surf city.
That was put out by Spider. Anyway, you brought up an interesting question. As you know, surfing the surf breaks out here, you can surf anywhere because the waves are quicker. It's not a point break or a reef break. It's a quick beach break, and it changes from day to day. So you're right. If you surf here, you can surf anywhere. And I surf just about everywhere. I made a lot of interesting surf trips. Well, when I retired, I'm still talking. Anyway, a lot of my friends were like Greg Knoll. He was a big name, and he always had some deal going, some sponsor with a surf trip. So I call it the Aloha circuit that we were on. We did a lot of exhibition surfings, and one trip in particular, Greg put it together with a sponsor, and we went to Bali, and there were about 40 of us, California guys. We stopped in Hawaii, picked up some of our Hawaiian friends, and then the Aussies and Kiwis joined us in Bali. So it was a big luau event down there of exhibition surfing. And then I was invited to surf in a cancer fundraising event in La Jolla at Scripps Pier, and that was a very nice event, and with a big luau, and Then let's see where, and then Hawaii. There was Greg Knoll's birthday party, which was a sponsorship. So that was fun. This was all after I retired from the lifeguard. So I called that the Aloha Circuit, and we had a lot of fun. And we couldn't surf very well. In fact, Greg couldn't hardly stand. He couldn't surf.
So over the years, what was your favorite surfboard you ever had? Did you have a favorite surfboard?
Mine. No, I rode all kinds of surfboards, and we would trade boards. You know, I rode Becker boards and Rick boards and Bing. I rode a lot of Bing boards. Greg Knoll made boards. You know, the surfboards. You know, it was started out with the Kook box, and then it was the balsa boards. And I neglected to talk about the in 1960 the polyurethane foam boards, and they developed that, and everybody started shaping polyurethane foam from some of the foam manufacturers. Gordon Clark and Walker were the main ones, and that made a big difference.
They sure were a lot lighter.
That's true.
Okay, I got one last question. What's your fondest memory in Hermosa Beach? It's very open-ended. I know you got an answer.
You want a political answer? Sure. Just knowing everybody from Hermosa. Yeah, anyway. All right, folks. Thanks for showing up. And thanks, Frank. And thanks, Jamie. And
thank you so much, Fred.